Well, the idea of residential college is the way that you make a huge university more intimate.
I asked him, what do you want me to do? He said, just enhance undergraduate education and I will back you with President Palms.
I know things went on, oftentimes things that Margaret and I didn't know about were going on, and some of them were pretty crazy.
And he just presented it so fondly. Tell's heart was involved, and I think it was a great way for the students to sort of become Prestonians.
I got a phone call from my former roommate at UVA, who was a New Yorker, but he was already in the English department. He was 1 year ahead of me, and he just said, Don, you're going to make a mistake if you don't come here, because President Jones is pouring money into the history department and the English department, and the focus in the English department is going to be American Lit, and you can start on the bottom floor. So I came. Thought I'd stay 3 years. I think, goodness, close to 50. I was promoted to associate professor with tenure in 3 years, full professor in 6. Then in 1991, the university had a new president, President John Palms, the best president I ever had here, and he needed a provost. I had not met Dr. Palms. Dr. Palms called me over to his office one day and said he had to have a search. He wanted me to chair the search committee. Would I do it? And I said yes. The search took 9 months. We got the man we wanted, James Meeser from Penn State. Dr. Meeser came in as provost and was surprised that the University of South Carolina had a position called vice provost and dean of graduate studies, but did not have a comparable position as vice provost / dean of undergraduate studies. So in August, late August, right before school was getting ready to begin, and I had my usual doctoral course and honors college seminar assigned to me, Dr. Meeser called me over to the office and said he had to have someone in this new position. Would I take it for 9 months? I asked for 24 hours to think it over, went back the next day and said, no sir, I'm not going to take it. He called me back the next day and asked me to take it, and he said, what do you want? And I said, I want to teach. And he said, okay, how about this? You teach your 2 courses in the fall, then you don't teach in the spring. So I came over to Osborne. I asked him, what do you want me to do? And he said, just enhance undergraduate education and I will back you with President Palms. And so I thought, all right, I know that students have told me over the years they wanted more academic contact, ungraded, with professors. They wanted a closer community with their fellow students. After all, this was a large campus even back in the early 90s. But my dream was a residential college. And I wanted one at the University of South Carolina because I knew that such a college, if it succeeded, would fulfill the wish of many undergraduates for more academic contact with professors, but ungraded discussions, etc.
So I toured the group around several residence halls.
And our first choice was Sims College in the women's quad. And the president said fine. But the problem was I ran into political issues because that's where the sororities were. And that's not a battle that I wanted to fight.
We looked at Columbia Hall just so they would see the difference between a high-rise and a lot more low-rise building.
So I took another tour with Gene and I said, it's got to be Preston. Why does it have to be Preston? Well, because it's simply located and we can set up the private dining, which was one of my other conditions, plus, of course, the 2,000 square foot apartment for a live-in principal. In fact, we can set up private dining in the Russell House. And so where the Preston dining room is used to be ping pong tables and pool tables. So of course that's revenue generating for student affairs. But we just took that offline.
I knew that when I took them to Preston there would be very little discussion of any other facility. Even though it was in terrific disrepair, it had been an all-men's hall and they had worn it out. So it needed to be renovated anyway. But it was really a convergence of of several opportunities that timing played a strong role in. One, Don Griner being interested in this and being the new dean for undergraduate studies. Two, me coming along and being totally open and really interested in this. The fact that the building needed renovation anyway, now we could tailor that renovation to fit within our vision for a residential college with faculty offices, with junior and senior commons and such. And so it was the right timing. If I tried to do that today, I'm not sure that I'd find the same reception.
So Dr. Meeser and President Palm said, okay, all right, now you got to go to the board. And I already knew 4 or 5 board members, and they had all lived in Preston. And I was, in effect, being warned, not out of fear, but be prepared. So we had not even discussed budget. It was going to cost millions. So I went to the board, just a standard board meeting, and I was asked questions, and I explained what I needed. Central location, co-ed, and I wanted suites. So there's discussion, and I forget which board member said, but you know, it's all very formal in a board meeting. If you've been there, it's Mr. Board Member, Dr. Griner. It's not Don and Eddie and Don and William. Dr. Griner, you know Preston has this history of being a prestigious residence hall for juniors and seniors who have to earn their way into it. To give you Preston would be a major change. We'll give you Bates. And my response was unprepared. I blurted out, Mr. Board Member, Bates is closer to the state of Georgia than it is to the Horseshoe. Big laugh. Eddie's grinning. Dr. Floyd is grinning. More discussion. And then the question. You say you want it to be co-ed. We don't have co-ed residence halls on this campus. We have a women's quad. I said, yes, sir, I know. We could still have a women's quad. We would still have, the young women could make choices where they'd like to live. Well, Dr. Griner, if you have suites, how do you envision this? And I said, this is what I have in mind. A suite, 2 men, bathroom, 2 men. And then I took a big gulp and I said, next will be 2 women, bathroom, 2 women. All the way, all 3 floors. Lots of discussion. So another board member, again, caught me off guard and said, but Dr. Griner, according to your plan, what happens if a young woman walks out in the hall? And I said, Mr. Board Member, she'll have to have on clothes. And it broke up the meeting with laughter, and Dr. Floyd gavelled down. He says, I think we can give Dr. Griner this. Dr. Meeser and I knew that we wanted someone who had lived in a residential college, and we had a search, on-campus search, in-house search. We knew we wanted Kevin.
Well, he was chosen.
I think it was mainly because of my credentials coming from Harvard and then Cambridge, England, where there were residential colleges.
He comes from this experience, so he knew how to do it, and that's why he was chosen.
Well, I knew, not sure how to do it, but I knew what made it work and why it was so good to get faculty, not teaching in classes, lecturing, but in socializing with students. I'm not sure who else applied for this job.
Well, I don't know.
Can
I
you
don't
know
know
anybody?
either. But I think they always. I think at the same time there was an honors college vacancy, and you wanted to apply for that, and they said no, we want you to apply for this. They kind of had Kevin in mind for that. I think. But he wrote down what it should be. And we've met with a lot of faculty associates. The faculty who were originally interested in it, and they had ideas. A lot of them came from a similar experience. And so we would have meetings, and Kevin would then summarize these and kind of implement, what we hoped to do. Well, it was the Provost Meeser. We were hired by Meeser, who left soon afterwards, and then left it to Don Griner, and he was kind of our boss at the time. But
In the provost office.
yeah, in the provost office.
Preston was closed in 94, 95. The goal was to open it in the fall of 95, which we did.
Well, and I'll tell you what happened that summer. Before it opened, they'd renovated it.
But we had our architects, I had them actually study residential colleges at other institutions, both in England and here. because I wanted them to have a feel for what we were trying to create in Preston.
We had to gut the building. The building, Preston at that time, was a traditional residence hall where the common bathroom showers at the end of the hall. It was not suite at all. Had no classroom, and one of my insistence was it got to have a seminar room right off the lobby so that the students in Preston can see there's learning going on all the time. Got to have faculty offices. This means taking rooms offline, losing revenue for housing. But the provost said that he, Dr. Meeser, would shift money to housing to pay for those revenue losses.
They came to me and they said, Becky, we have some end of the year money. It was something, and I can't remember how much it was. Maybe it was $25,000. It may have been even more. They said, you have 2 weeks to spend this money and furnish the JCR and the SCR. We got all this furniture. I remember we had a green sofa and a brown sofa, and we had a brown chair and a green chair with footrests. We had the most comfortable furniture, just gorgeous furniture, and then tables and things to go with it. It was lovely.
At that time, you have to remember, there were the quads across Blossom Street, suite style, had not been built. Preston was so popular. We advertised around campus. We held open house in Preston so I could get up and explain what we had in mind. We had a long waiting list. We had that wonderful application which was 4 pages, and the only page we paid attention to that we didn't tell the applicants this was fill in that blank page. We wanted creativity.
Maybe there wasn't such a sense of exploding creativity. We welcomed all that. We were starting from scratch. But you only start from scratch once. When we were there, our boss was the provost, and the provost was carte blanche. Do what you guys want. You're experienced. You have these wonderful kids.
And we did. We just had the most marvelous set of kids, creative and dynamic, and they really wanted to.
Yeah,
and they were self-governing. They were self-governing, and I think it made housing very nervous.
Housing was always wanting to get in and do things. We were grateful to them for organizing all the fees and all that. I mean, we needed it. We were partners, but they kind of wanted to make it in their own image.
Well, they didn't trust the students, and we did trust the students.
At the same time, they were like the idea of USC having a residential college, but they wanted to claim it.
Well, they wanted to control it like they do with the other ones, and we wanted to give the power to the students. And the students did exactly what we hoped they would do. What the thinking is, they do grow to meet expectations. They didn't go wild. They didn't have huge drinking problems or anything. It was quite a friendly. We could walk around the dormitory all over the halls anytime we wanted to. I mean, bad things may have gone on, but we never knew about them.
But there was so much sense of new possibility then. That was a perfect time for people like us, a couple like us, to be appointed principal, because we could sort of help to manage that, but stay back and let the kids do it.
In the early years, Preston tended to attract first-year students from around the country. Yes, we had honors, we had a lot of art students, and at that time there were a lot of Greeks because, of course, there was no Greek village. It was a great mix, and it was known as obviously open. I hate to use a word, this word's too strong, there's a better word, but utterly tolerant. It was welcoming. Come on, if you can get in. See, back then, it wasn't as easy to get into Preston.
And we always wanted to get a cross-section population of the years, sophomore, junior, senior, freshman even. And housing kind of was pushing us to make it many freshmen. Because that's how they
Well, it wasn't just housing, it was also...
But we didn't want that. We wanted the range of ages and experience.
I mean, the students were the best part of the experience, no doubt about it. And I'm still in touch with my wife passed away about a year ago, but I'm still in touch with a number of students who were here then, and it's it's very nice. It's a very nice feeling. I'd known Kevin for years and years, and I knew him partly from, he was in the religious studies department. I was interested in religious aspects of the Middle East, among other things. So we knew one another, but we mostly knew one another from playing squash. And we were both big squash players. And Kevin, at some point, he'd been here probably for 2 years, and they were getting ready to look for a replacement, and he just mentioned to me in the gym at one point, you know, you might like this, would you be interested in it? And we talked about it some more, and then of course Margaret and I had to decide whether this was something that we wanted to do. Well, it's an on-the-job training kind of thing for sure. I mean, we knew a lot of faculty associates, even though we weren't. And the people that we knew were very supportive of our taking the position. So we had a lot of people we could ask questions of, and a lot of people that we could get advice from, and we did do that. But yeah, you know, that first end of summer when the doors opened and the new batch of students that we all knew from their applications, but only that sort of started coming through the door, kind of think, gee, what have I done?
Well, the idea of residential college is the way that you make a huge university more intimate. I mean, you dine together, you eat together, you study together, you do things together. It's the traditional definition for college. People who live together and eat together and have the same interest.
You collaborate.
Yeah, it was about collaboration, and I think our theme was Preston, a place where people come together.
Preston was this ideal sort of arrangement in which you had all of the resources of a huge state university, Cooper Library across the street, best library in the state for sure, and that was, the Preston experience was like a small liberal arts college where you had a relatively small student body. Everybody knew everybody else. They did things together. Well, after us, Chris Robinson in the art department was the principal. I encouraged Chris to shadow us, and he was pretty busy, so there wasn't a lot of, I think there wasn't a lot of time for that. He'd been a faculty associate for a while, so he kind of had the general gist of things. And then for a time, there was an interim principal, Matt Miller.
I became principal mid-year, January 2007. An interim had been in place, and Hal French called me and said, Jim, we need to get more people applying for Preston's principalship. It's mid-year, it's off cycle. Would you throw your hat in the ring? I had just retired and I was kind of enjoying retirement, and my wife was not keen on the idea at first. But as we talked about it, we thought about the people who had preceded us, if we did get the job. You know, that'd be a nice group of people to be part of. So she finally said, if you want it, I'll support you, as she always does. And so I did apply and wound up as the principal. Took over in January 2007. When I entered his office, I was working for him. And when I left, I was working for Student Affairs. And Dennis Pruitt, Gene Luna being my direct boss. I mean, the provost virtually handed off Preston Residential College to Student Affairs during my transition. I mean, it was shocking. I wasn't happy. It seemed to me Preston belongs under the academic side of the university.
We tried to bring in faculty you know, to work with students, to collaborate with students, and to help the students, you know, fulfill their dreams and aspirations.
I wanted to recruit faculty associates, and so I went to the faculty senate. And I hoped to get 20 faculty associates, and I stood up and spoke about the goal. And I didn't have to wait. As soon as the meeting, the Senate was adjourned, there was a line of faculty in the center aisle asking to sign up. I got 40. No, I didn't. I mean, we got 40 faculty members immediately. Not even the next day. It was immediate. It was wonderful.
We had good support from the faculty associates in everything that we tried to do here. I don't ever remember either one of us trying to recruit faculty associates to do something and being turned down. The faculty was not, you know, up and above and out of everybody's range. And of course the faculty associates helped to hammer that home by participating in things that we did, by going to dinner, you know, a couple of nights a week or at least one. And so all of those things, I think, really created a flavor.
I tried to keep the British traditions sort of front and center. And so faculty associates knew that they were supposed to come on a regular basis to P Dining. So if they missed 2 weeks in a row, they'd hear from me. And consequently, we had pretty good attendance all the time. A lot of faculty members sitting with students, not each other.
And the dining, yeah, some of my best memories are those meals in the dining room. We would just stay there until they closed down, having conversation with students and faculty. That's some of my best memories, just sitting around the dining room talking.
And I ate there every Tuesday night. Every Tuesday night, I'd leave the administration building and walk over. I would get over there at 4:30 and sit in the lobby and just talk. And students would come through, oh, Dr. Garner, you know, we would talk, just talk. You're not going to get that in the other residence halls. And it was always fun the first Tuesday night of the fall semester after the first year students had moved in, because I would have 2 or 3 students walk up, are you Dr. Garner? Yes. Would you mind if I joined you? Are you kidding? Push the chairs aside and get in there.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't say a word about the tremendous support that we had from Miss Shirley over in the Preston dining room, and from Miss Francis and the crew that cleans the place and takes care of it. Those people were great.
I was at P Dining for 3.5 years, every night but 2. And I would, you know, go from table to table, or students would come around. I mean, I was really, I tried to be one of the community.
We had all these seminars on Tuesday night, and sometimes the students gave them, and sometimes the faculty gave them, and sometimes it was a collaboration. You know, students, I remember Jenny Malitzi and Carol Flake gave a seminar on spirituality. They were both interested in that, and they did it together, you know, and then some of the students would come in if they did something fun during the summer, like travel or something, or spend a semester abroad, they would come and show their slides.
And I wanted everything to be as much as possible from the bottom up. Student-initiated ideas, clubs, programs, events, that we would sort of shepherd through, help any way we could.
I wrote my dissertation while I was there. In the mornings I wrote, and then the afternoons I came in and worked in the office. And students would come in, you know, and say, what do you want to do? And we'd try to, you know, figure out a way that they could do it. It was really fun. And we'd make these, I usually had an assistant, we'd make these flyers and
We're
take
always
them
getting
around.
flyers out.
They did have a lot of money. The students had, and they could, I think that was a big issue too. I think housing uses the student money and they use it to provide food, all those good things that housing does. What we did is we gave it to the student government, and maybe, we said, okay. And so everybody had their little committees, and they would go up and propose money. We want $500 for the garden. We want $500 for publication. And then they would negotiate the money and allot everybody so much money. And that was so much fun to watch. We would kind of come and sit in the background. And it was fun to see the students negotiating power and learning leadership, learning compromise.
The way they allocated the money from student government to the various organizations, oh my gosh, they did such a great job with that. You would know people were speaking against an idea of one of their best friends. It was a bad idea, no matter whose idea it was, and they were not going to support it. I mean, they were just so professional.
The student they would come to me and they'd say, Dr. Grundy, we want a fish tank in the lobby. I said, form a fish committee. Me? Yeah, form a fish committee. We'll get somebody from marine science to help, but you do it. You get the group together.
We had a sunshine committee, and the sunshine committee did things to bring sunshine into the college. There were a wonderful group of students, and one year they built these marvelous candy houses at Christmas time that were just all over the lobby. They were just beautiful. But here maybe they dyed eggs. I mean, they would host events. They would maybe send little packages to students.
And slowly the students got used to it. Go to Dr. Griner or go to Kevin and Becky and say, okay, show me what you want to do, how you want to do it. We'll make sure it happens.
There were some committees, like I noticed in this book, there was a poetry committee, and they asked for money, and they used the money to buy a bunch of poetry books to put in the library in the JCR.
My sense is, because I became such close friends with so many Preston residents, that their leadership skills were enhanced. They would come up with ideas. Once they realized that suggestions for living in Preston were welcome, and once they realized that they could be given their head within reason to show a plan and then rely on us to make sure the funds were there, they became innovative.
I mean, I think these students, they wanted to invent this college, and they wanted to be the leaders, and they wanted to be creative, and they came in and they had a blast.
The students were such idea bunnies. Every week there was somebody coming up with a new idea for a new club, and everybody pitch in. Some of them would fizzle, but some of them lasted years. But there were clubs like, I know Nitwits was started by Kelly, the girl who joined me at the table with her boyfriend. They would just sit around and knit and talk. Chips, dips, and wrestling. They would get together on wrestling night. And just, something that didn't interest me one bit. But there was a devoted coterie of wrestling fans. Serial killers, cereal to eat. They'd sit around eating cereal boxes with milk.
FedEx, and I think it's still around maybe in some various ways, and that for us that stood for Friday Ethnic Dining Experience, and we'd pick an ethnic restaurant.
Vomit. Variations on mostly interesting talent. V period, O period, that always raised eyebrows. I mean, people with absolutely no talent would get up and just be a hoot. The fact that they had no talent was a talent. Other people were just really excellent.
And we hired a young PhD, English degree, Chris Armbrust. He realized that we had a significant number of Prestonites who were either in music or had sung in high school church choirs or school choirs. And so he got them together as Preston singers, and he held rehearsals.
Once a month we had a Preston tea.
There was always a monthly tea for the Prestonites and for the faculty associates, and the tea was always held in the principal's lodge. And at least twice a year, once in the fall, once in the spring, part of the tea we would all be quiet, and Chris would bring in the choir, Preston choir, and they'd sing a couple of songs.
And the food, the table would be groaning with food. We would work. I had a Preston tea committee who would come in and sometimes bake cakes, but I also had a caterer. But the famous thing was the Preston punch. I made gallons of Preston punch, and it was white grape juice and ginger ale with little rings. We put strawberries in the ice rings, and those kids would come in. I mean, they were usually from 4 to 6, and from about 4 to 4:30, there would just be so many students around that table. They were eating the supper. The table would be, no matter how much food I had, it was all gone
She's
in
an
the first 30
incredible hostess.
minutes. I mean, I would just order food, and I had students helping, replenishing food. No matter what happened, the food was usually gone in the first 30 minutes. They would come in so hungry, they would be lined up. And then we would have teas. Here were the Spice Girls. They came to tea one day.
These were pretty classy operations as I recall them, and we had lots and lots of faculty and student participation.
We had a hat tea, we had a pajama tea, we had a porch party. We often had porch parties, and they would be kind of climbing through that window into the lodge. We sang Christmas carols, we had Valentine's. Oh, we had my favorite was tea times. They would have coloring contest, and they would sit around and make pictures.
As I think back about it, I remember the banquets and the parties and people dressing up in goofy costumes. And on one occasion, it was a Halloween party, and John Palms, who at that time was the president of the university, and he and his wife were good neighbors. They were just across the horseshoe there, and we got to know them, and we always invited them to Preston events, and they came when they could. But he came to a Halloween party, and he had put an incredible amount of work into a Dracula costume, and nobody knew who he was. It was incredible. When I think about that time, I guess I think of it both in terms of things that were going on here and in the university, but also things that were going on globally. I'm a modern Middle East historian by training, and we were here in 2001, and we had students here in 2001 whose parents were in the New York area, or in one case, at least that I can recall, parents who worked for the State Department and were in Washington on September 11th, 2001. There can be a lot of drama at Preston. Anyone who's lived here for more than a couple of days knows that. And the drama is a good part of it. It's inevitable. But that experience kind of made the local drama seem to recede a good bit and maybe put things in perspective.
The nation's financial crisis was difficult for us, but for the whole university. We had to suffer budget cuts, but everybody understood it. The students realized, some of it had older siblings who'd been here in the good times. They understood what we were going through, and there was no complaining.
If a scholar wants to do research on F. Scott Fitzgerald, the scholar has to go to 2 universities. One is Princeton. The other university is the University of South Carolina because of Matthew J. Bruckley, surely the greatest Fitzgerald scholar ever. And he had amassed this world-class collection.
We had a wonderful friend in George Terry. He was head of the libraries at the time we were there, but he knew the university collections. He knew everything that the university owned.
George knew that Zelda's odd-sized sofa, for some reason, and I do not know how this happened, was currently over in McKissick, in storage in McKissick. If it wasn't in McKissick, it was off-site storage for McKissick Museum. Matt Bruckley, Dr. Bruckley, must have found out about it and contacted George Terry. And George Terry is the one who signed the paper to send Zelda over to Preston. And when Zelda showed up in Preston, it reminded me of my days as a fraternity man, how many guys can you get in a telephone booth? So someone said to me, some Prestonite, I forget, Dr. Griner, we want to have a contest. Okay, what's your contest? We want to see how many people we can get on Zelda. They named the sofa Zelda. I said, it's not going to bother me because we'll have to recover it anyway eventually. And so there were photographs taken. I think when I left Preston, I believe the record was 21. God help the people on the bottom.
All the students sitting on that Zelda couch.
And that became a kind of annual affair for a while. Can we defeat last year's record? I'm not sure it was ever beaten.
We had the event squad, which helped plan major events for the college.
I'll tell you another wonderful memory we had. The banquets.
Because of Zelda, some of the students said, and I agreed with them, look, we're going to have a banquet in the fall, we're going to have one in the winter, if you will. We ought to have a final banquet. And I got together with 3 or 4. And someone said, well, let's just call it the Great Gatsby Banquet. And so I said, okay, where do you want to have it? Because normally you'd have it over in the Carolina Room at Capstone, or we had one up on the circular restaurant. And my suggestion was, look, the seniors are going to be leaving, people are going to be tearing up. I think we ought to have it at Preston if you guys agree. I'm not telling you to do that, if you agree. And we'll make it formal, and we'll get some awards. And we did. We made sure there was croquet to play. After the dinner, we made sure there was a jazz band or combo. We want to have one tradition that every single year of Preston has, so that the students who were here 20 years ago can say, oh yeah, my Gatsby, this is what we did. What did you do at your Gatsby banquet?
We also had a Preston photographer. He was really, really good. Rob was his name. And we had collages made of photographs that were in the dining room. Our thing was that every year students would do those, and then they would line the dorm halls. We took the students on trips. We went skiing with them.
There's a skiing trip, I saw that recognized somewhere.
We went to the farm. We went to Biltmore and stayed at the farm.
I remember one thing that we did, which was unusual at that time. I think it's been done subsequently again, but working on a Habitat for Humanity house that was parked out here in front of the building. They brought the house on a flatbed trailer, and it wasn't just Preston students, but a lot of Preston students were involved in it and working on that. And of course, homecoming and getting groups of students together to go down to a home football game and walking down, that was kind of nice. It was an unusual, well, I guess not unusual for students, but most of my colleagues wouldn't walk to the football game. They'd take their car and figure out a way to try to park. But anyway, those things were fun.
John Palms was walking over to Preston, walking up the
I think
back
he was
stairs.
walking out of Preston.
You think so?
He was walking out, and Matt Katz was in that corner. He was walking
on the porch,
toward the Preston.
on the porch, and he had this gun, and he shot a potato way up in the air. And the president of the university, he just got shooting a potato gun, just smiled, said, "How you doing?"
Or he said, "Good shot."
"Good shot."
But I think this is one of the things that Housing was so worried about, because Kevin did encourage the special forces, the people to do pranks.
We even used the word pranks, I think. And we got into a kind of a prank fight over with Maxie in Preston, remember?
Yeah,
Preston would do something to Maxie, Maxie would do something
Yeah.
back. Small things. But yeah, and young people responded to that. They liked that. What can we do next?
Well, I'm pretty sure it was Monica Bracey whose idea it was to paint murals on the stairs, which were in terrible shape. They needed painting, and the university was about to paint. And she said, well, could we decorate? Kids would bring their friends over to see the stairs. Parents loved it. I mean, it was just a wonderful thing. Some of their ideas, like Y Impact, very mainstream. I mean, charitable, trying to contribute to charities. And I remember Susan Komen's Race for the Cure, Pink, breast cancer. We raised a lot of money for that one year, and the students asked me if I would dye my hair pink for I think $100 challenge. And I said, sure. So you can still find a picture of me on the internet with my hair dyed pink. These kids were, as I said, idea bunnies. My wife and I just scratch our heads. How can they think of these things? But there was no end to those ideas.
The one thing that I always told people was that I was astonished from day one at how respectful students were of our privacy. You know where the principal's lodge is, and you see students for X number of hours a week in a classroom setting, and they move on to somewhere else and you move on to somewhere else. But if you come here and live with them, you see what they're juggling. You see that this kid who didn't do very well in my modern Middle East history class is an incredibly talented musician, or a poet, or an actor, or whatever. And so it rounded out the perspective that I had of students.
I think the important tradition for Preston is innovation. And so every cohort of students who come in, we really encourage them to really, you build on traditions, but really think about what that new great idea might be, and to really sort of claim it as your own.
Preston has certainly been blessed over the years with some remarkable people, and I think Preston has made them more so. Preston gives for everything it takes. As I once said to somebody, Preston changed me more than I changed it, and that was for the good. I think it made me a better person.
There were so many people, young people, old people, faculty, students who would respond to Becky, a little bit to me, but to Becky, especially to her enthusiasm.
Well, he was the idea guy. It was the most fun job I've ever had. I really loved doing that. I think I liked it better than he did.
It was hard. At the end of 3 years, I sort of wanted to do something else, go overseas and all that.
He had a full right to
but
teach.
Becky had a hard time leaving that place. She was so involved in it. The advantage for us being the first principals was being new, being first. All the subsequent principals have had to live with the legacy of how it got started and who did it, and maybe in that shadow. But it's so much fun starting something new.
But any principal can go in and start things new. Well, it was always a work in progress. We always said this is a work in progress.
And it always was, and I hope it always will be, because things would change, and change is hard, and we institute some new concept or some new idea, and half of the students would think that was great, and the other half would think it was, you know, the approach of the end of the world. But that's life, basically, and things do change. I mean, I have kept in touch, less so in the last couple of years, but I can see how things are going. I know Bobby well. I've known him for a long time. We're colleagues in the same department, and it's continuing to be a work in progress, and it's progressing nicely.
It's just fascinating to me to see that we could put together a small idea back in 1993, 94, that here 20 years later is just a clear part of the fabric of who Carolina really is.
This is your building. This is your community. This is part of your undergraduate identity at Carolina. And so for now 20 years, people have come in and they've left. come in and left. And over the course of those 20 years, I think there is a strong cohort. When you think about what is my Carolina experience, it's 1323 Green Street, it's Preston.